this sort of generalized plant cell. What are the big blue things? The big blue things. Let me fill those in. They look like little lakes or swimming pools or reservoirs of some sort. What do we call them? The vacuoles. So storage in the cell, one of the things that they do, who here has seen a plant wilt? Actually, look at my peace lily, the one right behind Sawyer and Madison, up in the window there. Over the weekend, I forgot to water it up on Friday. I usually really load it up, and it's in too small a pot, so it's pretty sensitive to fluctuations in water. So when I came in this morning, all the leaves were just drooping. And I gave it some water, and it's starting to perk up. The water in the plant cells actually is what helps keep them upright. So it's called, they're turgid. They are swollen with water, and so they sort of stay firm, and the plant stands upright. When the plant starts to run out of water, they start to go, they droop, they wilt. I missed that, but we're just going to keep moving. So we've got those vacuoles, which are a storage thing, and they're also part of the structural thing. But more importantly, we have these things that tell us this is a plant cell, and these are chloroplasts. And that is the actual place where photosynthesis happens. So, anybody remember the chemical equation for photosynthesis? What is it? What do plants take in? Let's see if we can get that part. Okay, so I'm gonna give you this. It's something plus something. Sunlight sometimes is shown as a chemical reactant, but really, I mean, it's number one, it's really any light, and number two, the sunlight isn't actually used in the chemical reaction. So it's more appropriate to show that, you know, sunlight is sort of a facilitator of this reaction. The energy from the sunlight creates something. What? What are they taking in? Do plants take in oxygen like you and I? No. What do they take in? Carbon dioxide. Okay. So we have CO2, and let's focus now on what they put out. What do plants put out? What do they make out of that CO2 and something else? Oxygen and sugar. So we have O2, and the sugar is in the form of C6H12O6. That's glucose. So what's the last thing that they take in to do this? They have to have, where are they getting the hydrogen from? Water. So carbon dioxide plus water, you add sunlight and a whole bunch of chemicals that are found in the plant, you get out of that O2 and sugar. You get oxygen and sucrose, or glucose, in the plant cells. And they use some of that for energy. They store some of that. You have eaten plant foods. If you have never eaten a plant or a vegetable or anything else in your life, you've still eaten energy that was captured from the sun by plants, even if it went through a couple other layers of consumers first. Okay, well, cool. So we've got this generalized equation for photosynthesis. Generalized animal cell. What structures do you see there that you recognize? You should be writing this down. Ribosomes. What are the ribosomes? Little dots. Yeah, very small structures in the cell. What happens at the ribosomes? Protein synthesis. Yeah, that's where the protein actually gets built. Did we see ribosomes in the plant cell? Yeah. Yes. Plants build protein as well. If you have eaten beans, that is a plant-derived protein. Those are proteins that were built by plants. If you've eaten peanuts or almonds or walnuts, those are all plant foods that are high in protein. Wheat has proteins in it. Those are all built at ribosomes, aside from the proteins that are just part of the cell itself. Okay, so we got ribosomes. What else do we see? Endoplasmic Reticulum. It's so fun to say. Go ahead. You know you want to. Endoplasmic Reticulum. No? Not so much? I'm sorry. Okay, I entertain myself endlessly. The endoplasmic reticulum are these tube-like structures. They're mostly related to transport in the cell. And the rough ER, as it's called, is what has these sort of lumps on it. What are the little lumps? They're actually ribosomes that are embedded in the wall of the endoplasmic reticulum. So they can make proteins and pop them right into the ER. Okay. And we're not too worried about that. What are those blue things? Mitochondria. They're often shown as blue. They look a little bit like chloroplasts. If you look at the interior structure, they've got some surface membranes. And those mitochondria perform a chemical reaction. Do you know what they perform? Do you remember? And this is what we're going to talk about when we do our fermentation unit after the test. So mitochondria perform a chemical reaction called cellular respiration. Okay, so cellular respiration. What does it mean if you are performing respiration? What do you think of that as? Breathing. Yeah. So we think of respiration to mean breathing. I'm respiring. You can do artificial respiration. You can do cardiopulmonary resuscitation with artificial respiration. This is a little different. So there's a chemical process that is called cellular respiration. It happens in the mitochondria. And it takes in, you need oxygen, plus something else, and you produce two things. So you need oxygen and you need, this is going to look frighteningly familiar, C6H12O6. You need glucose. Try to rearrange this a little bit. You need oxygen and glucose. Guess what you get out of this? Carbon dioxide and water. Does that look weirdly familiar? Does it look like anything you just saw, but backwards? It's so weird. Yeah. Basically, these chemical processes complement one another. So you have plants, and now plants do perform cellular respiration, but they perform a lot of photosynthesis. You have animals and fungi and protists and all these other living things performing cellular respiration. Oh. So these processes really complement one another. In a plant cell, you will notice there are mitochondria. They are performing cellular respiration. But the big process that we tend to talk about in plants is photosynthesis. It's more important to us, and they're getting more of their energy from photosynthesis. They are still getting energy from cellular respiration. But that energy is more doing the work of just the cell. The overall plant is deriving its energy largely from photosynthesis. The chemical that is produced here, which we don't usually list, but perhaps we should. The chemical that's produced here in addition to those two, so the CO2 and the water are byproducts. They're sort of accidents. The thing that your cells are really after is something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. You don't need to know that. But it's a molecule that your cells use for energy. The plant cells that are doing photosynthesis are still using ATP to power part of that process. They're getting energy from sunlight, but their cells are still manufacturing some ATP for some other processes. So ATP is, all you need to know is that's an energy molecule. Okay, mitochondria, Golgi apparatus nobody cares about. Ribosomes, you know, we've talked about ribosomes a lot. Do this cool thing. They do this cellular respiration. It gets you energy. If you are walking up steps or running, your muscle cells have lots of those little mitochondria. They do lots of cellular respiration because what do your muscle cells do? They only do one thing. It's a boring life. What do? Expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand. You get the picture. Expand, contract, expand, contract. To do that expansion and contraction takes cellular energy. It takes ATP. It takes this chemical source. Okay. So great. They need oxygen. They need sugar. Has anybody here ever gotten a muscle cramp? Oh, they're vicious. They're evil. They're deadly. You're running and your legs cramp up. You're trying to exert force over a long period of time. You're lifting things. You're moving things. Your muscles cramp up. What's happening? What are those horrible shooting pains in your muscles? Okay. You either don't have enough oxygen or you don't have enough sugar. But the big one is actually oxygen. I am the world's slowest and most awkward and least graceful runner. I think I run like a drunken gorilla, making after a banana. It's okay. I'm okay with it. It's me. I know about it. Like, it's not a secret from me. I know how I look when I run. I don't have any illusions. So as I'm running, awkwardly and slowly and clumsily, if I don't fall down, it's all good. I'm breathing, and I sound like a locomotive, because my lungs are attempting to get enough oxygen into my blood to get that oxygen to every single little cell that I am asking to do what? Go ahead with me. This is finger puppet biology theater. Expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract. You people are no fun whatsoever. Expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract. I hope you have nightmares about this. Expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract. Get the picture. So, as you're asking your muscles to do this, expand, contract, they need oxygen to make ATP so that they can do that. At the point when you're not able to efficiently deliver oxygen to all those cells that you're saying, come on, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract. What happens? They can't do this anymore. Dude! It's over! I got no oxygen to work with! Does this actually happen in your cells? Oh, yes. Yes, it does. This actually happens in your cells. There comes a point when you can... Who here has pushed themselves to the point where they are gasping for breath, they cannot draw another deep breath, and they're cramping up, and they're miserable? Okay. I haven't done it in a long time. I'm too old to push myself that way. I've come pretty close backpacking a few times. Once your body can't deliver oxygen to those cells, you can't do cellular respiration. You're missing one of the chief ingredients for cellular respiration, which is oxygen. What happens then? Well, I should mention that this is actually called aerobic cellular respiration. Aerobic cellular respiration. And what aerobic means, and you probably want to write this down, is with oxygen. Okay? And that means it's with oxygen. So what happens when your body says, no, dude, the little muscles that are going expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract, what happens when they run out of oxygen? No expanding or contracting. Well, there are certain muscles in your body for which that is not an option. Name me one. Your heart. So your body will preferentially shunt oxygenated blood to your heart, and it will cut off your legs altogether. Not literally like with a hacksaw or anything, but it will deny your legs and your arms oxygen to get that oxygenated blood to your heart. Because your body knows, the heart stops, you're done. That's it. So the rest of the muscles in your body, when there's not enough oxygen to go around, the rest of the muscles in your body will do something. Let me copy this. Copy. Paste. Called anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic cellular respiration. And anaerobic cellular respiration, guess what that means? Without oxygen. So when the oxygen runs out, This is when cells start to do anaerobic cellular respiration. And the anaerobic cellular respiration is kind of cool because there are two flavors of it. And we're going to do both flavors in here next week. So anaerobic cellular respiration, there are two kinds. One is what's called lactic acid fermentation, and the other is called alcoholic fermentation. Fermentation. Here we go. So, guess which kind your muscles do, the cells in your body do. I'll give you a hint, your muscles are not drunk. Lactic acid fermentation. And actually, has anybody had enough, do you do this in health, talk about what muscle cramps actually are? They're a buildup of lactic acid in your muscles. So there's literally acid in your muscles, and that's why it hurts. Because if they run out of oxygen, your cells go, okay guys, all the oxygen's going to the heart, guess we better make do. And your muscles start to actually perform lactic acid fermentation. Basically until it gets to a point where it hurts, you stop demanding more energy from them. Expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract. Okay, just chill. And once you do that, then they can slowly start to flush out the lactic acid and they can recover. And then as you're taking deep breaths and yet there's no more big strenuous demand being made on your body, then you can go ahead and go back to cellular respiration with oxygen, the aerobic cellular respiration. So there are two products for lactic acid fermentation. Well, let's just put it this way. What does this produce? Well, it gets you a little bit of ATP. Remember we said ATP is what your cells need to do their thing. Expand, contract, expand, contract, expand, contract. Nightmares, I tell you, nightmares. So you get a little bit of ATP out of this, not a whole lot. Who here has ever run with muscle cramps? Do you perform your best? No, you pretty much stink until you finally listen to what your body is saying and you just stop. So you get a little bit of ATP, not a whole lot, and you get, surprise, lactic acid. Because biochemists are so creative in what they name processes. You get a little bit of ATP and you get lactic acid. That's good. Yeah, it's not hard to forget. You produce lactic acid in lactic acid fermentation. Now, guess what you produce in alcoholic fermentation? Alcohol. But there is a byproduct also. So in alcoholic fermentation, again, you get like little teeny tiny amounts of ATP, not a whole lot. But you do get some tiny amount. And you get alcohol, ethanol to be specific. And there is one other byproduct of this process. We talked a little bit about this last week. Carbon dioxide. Yeah, CO2. When we make our root beer next week, we are going to carbonate our root beer using yeast farts. I know. Doesn't that make you want to drink it up? The yeast are going to produce a little bit of alcohol, and they're going to produce a bunch of CO2. And so that CO2, since we're going to keep it in a nice sealed vessel, is going to be pressurized into the root beer. And we're going to have very fizzy root beer, trust me. Those are the basics. Now, you have probably consumed foods that were the result of this process. Some organisms are better at doing each of these processes than others. Some of them have evolved to do one process over the other. So, your muscles will do which of these as a backup? Lactic acid fermentation, hence muscle cramps, because acid in your muscles hurts. Your muscles cannot do alcoholic fermentation no matter how hard you think about it. It's not going to happen. There are some organisms that do nothing but alcoholic fermentation. Yeast do alcoholic fermentation. This is how they get energy. It's not terribly efficient, but it's what they do. And I don't know if they can do aerobic cellular respiration. I'd have to look that up, like if you put them in a bubbler tank. I don't know. I really don't know. But yeast that we use to bake bread or to brew alcohol for human consumption do alcoholic fermentation preferentially. You're not capable of that. So there are bacteria that do alcoholic fermentation. So there are some organisms that tend to do alcoholic fermentation. There are also bacteria that do lactic acid fermentation. Who here has ever eaten yogurt or cheese? Or actually, does anybody have anybody ever eaten homemade sauerkraut? I love homemade sauerkraut. It smells terrible in the house when it's being made. Have you been around a house where sauerkraut was being made? I'm going to pause this. This sauerkraut, you know? See, I can turn anything into food. I like to eat. What is... Kind of, yeah. It's fermented cabbage. So, to make sauerkraut, who here has ever seen a head of cabbage? I will assign homework. I will send you to Giant Eagle for homework. So cabbage, this nice little cole vegetable that grows in these nice little heads, green and red and whatever. You shred that up. You put it in a big container. You put a layer of cabbage, a layer of salt, a layer of cabbage, a layer of salt, all the way up. Then you put a weight on top of it. My grandma had the sauerkraut rock. It was a rock Grandpa found out in the field. She had painted it a particular color, and it wasn't to be used for anything else, and it sat on the shelf most of the year. And you put some kind of weight on it, and you know, she had a wooden thing that just fit inside the crock that had holes in it so liquid could come up through. And that salt starts to actually break down the cell walls. Oh my gosh, we could do a whole unit on sauerkraut, and we could do cell transport, and we could do fermentation. Oh, this is fabulous. You look horrified. You don't like sauerkraut, do you? Okay, I won't make you eat it. So anyway, the salt starts to draw water out of the cells because the water is moving from the area of higher water concentration to lower water concentration. So the water comes out of the cells, the cabbage goes all wilty, and then suddenly you've got this wilty cabbage floating in a sea of salt water. Well, there are little bacteria and yeasts that are naturally occurring on the surface of the cabbage. And those things will start to decompose the cabbage. But what they're doing is lactic acid fermentation. And so that acid, who here has ever tasted sauerkraut? Okay. Who here likes sauerkraut? I love sauerkraut. Three of us in this club. That's okay, more for us. That tart acid flavor of sauerkraut is lactic acid. Same as the thing that makes the tart flavor in yogurt. And they produce lactic acid. People used to use lactic acid fermentation to ferment a lot of vegetables before they had refrigeration, because that acid is also a preservative. Just like you can pickle things in vinegar and they'll stay good, the cabbage is basically pickling itself. Those little bacteria on the surface of the cabbage are creating this acid broth that the cabbage is then swimming in. So, questions?